Sydney Catholic Schools is proud to present So You Want to Be a Changemaker.
I'm Kevin Carragher, Director of Education Research at Sydney Catholic Schools, and we're recording on Gadigal land. With me today is our student co-host, Isaac, from St John Bosco College at Engadine. Isaac, can you share with me a little bit about your First Nations heritage and what it means to you?
Yep, so my First Nations heritage is on my dad's side. My great-great-grandmother, Margaret Gleaves, she lived in Condobolin and then was later moved to a mission in Wellington.
Yep.
And my tribe is Wiradjuri. And what it means to me is just how I express myself as an individual and how I can educate and show my knowledge about my heritage to my family, friends and peers throughout school, and just how I express myself as an individual, yeah.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about your school and what you love about your school?
What I love about St John Bosco, I feel like the atmosphere is just great. It's engaging. It's a supportive environment between the staff and the students, and the different year groups, how they collaborate together. Like in our pastoral, how like we all have a different set of year groups in our like our homeroom roll call, as we say.
Yep.
And then I just have it has a strong sense of community throughout the school, and like it offers you a place where you can learn and grow in a positive manner for your future endeavours outside of school.
Great.
That's what I love about school, yeah. I love Bosco.
And I've heard that Bosco has done a lot of work on their Reconciliation Action Plan. Can you tell me a little bit about what that aims to achieve?
Yeah, so our reconciliation, our RAP plan, I've been a part of the consultation team with my brother and dad since the beginning. It started, I think, last year. We do like a meeting maybe every term to just discuss our future path, what we want to take. And then our RAP plan, we want to work closely with our community and respectfully integrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures across the curriculum at our college. We hope to raise awareness, understanding, further educate staff and students alike. We want reconciliation at a college to have a focus on empathy, and this is gained between the relationship between the past, present, and future students at our college and future, Aboriginal descendants.
Great. Very impressive. That's amazing work. And you're in Year 12 at St John Bosco. What are your plans after school?
My plans after school are two very sort of different directions. I want to end up at the same goal, but like at the end, I want to end up doing in the fireys, in the fire brigade. I feel like that's a path I always want to do. It's something I always want to do since my uncle's done it. I just think it's just a path I want to take. But then after school, I either want to do a uni course with PDHPE. I want to do maybe a teaching degree and just do casual work as well as the fireys, like on and off shifts. Otherwise, getting a qualification, I feel like would be a good thing to have under my belt as well as doing the fireys.
That's a great plan. We have a terrific guest with us today. Would you mind introducing her for us?
Our guest today is a proud Barkindji woman, leader, advocate and businesswoman whose work is making a meaningful difference in communities across Australia. As the founder and Managing Director of Nganya, an Aboriginal engagement consultancy, she supports and challenges organisations to make valuable contributions that drive sustainable social change for equitable outcomes. With over 17 years of experience in public health policy, stakeholder engagement, her expertise has created a real change in how First Nations people are heard and understood. Her work spans reconciliation action plans, executive coaching, and the cultural capability development, collaborating with the Sydney Children's Hospital, the Department of Communities and Justice, New South Wales Health. Named the Canberra Indigenous Businesswoman of the Year in 2022, she also holds qualifications in health science, trauma counselling, and executive coaching.
Please welcome to the podcast, Dixie Crawford. Dixie, it's an honour to welcome you.
Thanks for having me. I also want to acknowledge that I am on Wiradjuri country out in Dubbo and pay my respect to elders past and present, and also acknowledge the country that you are recording this podcast on in lovely, sunny, hopefully sunny Gadigal land, and also the land that all of our listeners are on today. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You've built an incredible career advocating for change. Can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired your passion for your work and the steps that you took in turning that passion into a successful career?
So I come from a really large family out in Brewarrina, a little place in far western New South Wales near Bourke. Most people know where Bourke is because they say the back of Bourke. But my little town is known for our fish traps. So we have the oldest man-made structure in the world, our fish traps. And for me, I grew up really spending time listening to my grandmother and my mother and aunties and uncles and other elders in our community, really trying to advocate for advancing designing and delivering services that meet the needs of our local communities to create more equitable outcomes. So from a very young age, I remember going to land council meetings, AECG meetings with my grandmother and just being around that as a young girl. So that sense of social justice and advocacy was really built into me from about 6 or 7. And as time went on, I spent, when I was in high school, I did Aboriginal studies and society and culture and legal studies. So those subjects really presented the opportunity for me to start to broaden my horizon and my understanding of the world outside of my little tiny community. And after I finished high school, I then went on and studied a degree in health science at CSU. And once again, that really paved the way for me just to be aware of what other people's lived experiences were in the world, particularly other First Nations communities across the country. And so from there, I then went into working for New South Wales Health, spent 17 years in public service in DCJ, New South Wales Health and the Kids Network, as you mentioned before. And I guess I just really wanted to be having a say and advocating for what is in the best interest of communities and how it is that we meet their needs. So when people are accessing services, whether it be in child protection, in housing, education, or health, that we are actually understanding what it is that they need, what it is that they want, and we respond to that in the most adequate and appropriate and culturally safe and sound way. So I've always been around social justice, always been around advocacy since I was a kid, and it's just shaped, it's really part of my core identity, who I am and what I want to do, and I guess where I'm going in life.
Well, that's great. So Dixie, also, your business, Nganya, means firelight in Barkindji language. Can you tell us a bit about the meaning behind your business and why you chose this name?
So Isaac, my nickname actually as a kid is Cyclone. So it probably tells you, and I've had that name since I was a really young kid. So that probably tells you the type of personality that I have. I kind of fly in, ask all the questions, and then fly out. My cousins would say that I fly in, muck things up, and then leave it. But anyway, we don't need to talk about my cousins. But for me, what I wanted to do with that name resonated with me, Nganya, because I guess in the space of First Nations affairs in this country, I feel like we've been asking the right questions, but we haven't really been getting the right answers to shape the decisions that need to inform service delivery. I guess also the thought leadership that sits behind how it is that we approach the inequalities that Aboriginal people experience in this country. So for me, fire in its essence, right, when it all burns down to the ground, particularly on country, it gets rejuvenated. And for me, I do want to burn down the system in the most appropriate and respectful way, where we actually start to expose the problems in decision making and these systems that consistently oppress and reduce the likelihood of Aboriginal people living healthy, happy lives in our own country. So I want us to be able to be considering new questions and coming up with new answers to actually meet the needs of communities. And that really is about listening to mob on country around what it is that they want and what it is that they need. So for me, Firelighter is about sparking the question, burning it down and starting again and rebuilding in a way that it's respectful and considerate to everyone's needs.
Wow, that's beautiful. Also, Dixie, you work with both First Nations people and non-Indigenous clients. How do you create a safe and impactful conversation within your work?
I guess I don't know how to, I guess that's probably a question for my clients, right? In terms of how do we do this together. My approach is always about compassion and curiosity. One of the most important things that my grandmother shared with me when I was a kid was to meet racism and resistance with compassion and curiosity. And I've always learned that, right? So even when someone does say something that is just cringeworthy for me, or I really can't stand it, I feel sick in the guts and I want to, rip in and have a really direct conversation. One of the things that I observed my grandmother doing all the time was being really critical but effective at these conversations, right? And so sometimes there are people that are blatantly racist, absolutely, right? There's that overt racism, but there are also people that just don't know things. And so I really have this approach of meeting a question or any form of resistance with curiosity. So what's informing this person's decision? What makes them ask this question? Is there a lack of information? Is there a lack of education? Is there just a lack of insight? And I can work with that. I can also work with racism, right? Because then we can directly call that out and communicate with someone how their behavior, how their words are affecting other people, in particular me, when I'm in that situation. But My grandmother always approached these conversations really effectively and efficiently to unpack what the actual issue is. And if it's lack of education insight, we can build that, we can understand that, and we can build capacity around that. So I think in terms of the relationships that I've built with my clients over the years and also my colleagues when I was working in the public service was just about trying to understand each other. Now, if as much as I'm advocating for trying to understand, for people to understand and hear First Nations communities, I also need to understand and hear other people, because it takes two of us to be able to work on this and address these challenges, these inequities that Aboriginal people experience. We've got to do it together if we want to be impactful.
Dixie, what would you say are the biggest challenges that First Nations peoples have in being understood when it comes to interacting with corporates or government?
I think it's a couple of things. So one of the challenges that I know, and First Nations leaders and community members will tell you this, is that when government or corporate are making decisions around, a program or service delivery, they've already made the decision and they've kind of already coming out and telling Aboriginal communities this is what we're going to do, right? So it's kind of like, we'll get our people to tell your people what the solution is to the problem that you have in your community that was caused by colonisation, right? And so rather than actively engaging with and consulting with First Nations communities, the decisions are already being made based upon data rather than the qualitative conversations in community about what we've got to do and how a particular solution might be implemented and what the goal is that we're trying to achieve, not from the perspective of success, but actually from the perspective of improved outcomes and greater impact where we improve the lived experiences of Aboriginal communities. So I think the decision making is lacking there. I think also red tape from a bureaucracy point of view. There are communities that need immediate assistance yesterday, and we don't need to keep waiting and waiting and waiting, because we already know the data, we know the experiences that Aboriginal communities are having, yet we're still having the same conversation over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So I think the efficiency in terms of decision making and delivering services to have a bigger impact, it's just a slow transition, and I don't really understand why, because we've been doing this, this has been the state of play for 30 or 40 years. I think also the biggest challenge is actually recognizing that every community is different and they've got unique needs. So what works in Bogabilla is not going to work in Bourke. What works in Bourke is not going to work in Mount Druitt. What works in Mount Druitt is not going to work in Brisbane, right? So we have to be understanding that we have to have a unique approach to community engagement to understand what are some of the solutions to the challenges that communities have.
What does that usually look like? What does good engagement and good listening look like in an authentic, meaningful way that translates into effective change?
Yeah, look, it looks like going out and asking the questions. What do you need from us as an organisation? How can we support you, rather than imposing a solution onto a community? And that's always been the case, right? To be honest, one of the reasons I left the public service was because I realised I was a lot smarter than the people that were sitting in decision-making positions. And that's, we all know that that's an experience we all have at one point. We're just like, how did you get this job? I'm so much smarter than you. But for me, I think it's about going out and talking. It is really about listening to communities and not having one-off approaches to engagement. So you've got to be consistently turning up and be consistently waiting for your time to have a say in a community. A lot of Aboriginal communities are not hierarchical in the sense that the Western world is, right? So the big dog is not at the top of the table. The CEO is not necessarily the most powerful person or influential person within a community. So we have different structures that are based on our law, as in LORE. We've also got different structures in terms of age and lived experience and people that are elders. And then there are it's just a different process. So we've got to recognise the differences that exist there. And we also have to recognise that it has to take time for us to build trust. So if you turn up to a community and just expect people to give you an answer, it's not going to happen like that. You have to be familiar. People have to know who you are. So there's a really good principle in marketing which is a bit different to, to the work that I do, but I really like it because it's a principle around know, like, trust. So people need to know who you are. They need to like the way that you approach your work and your relationship building. And if they don't know who you are, they don't like who you are, they're never going to trust you. So you really got to build that know, like, trust principle in terms of building relationships with First Nations communities.
Great.
Well,
Isaac, this is a bit of fun, this segment.
Yes.
So over to you.
yeah, so Dixie, I'm going to fire some questions at you, and it's just would you rather. So the first one is, would you rather speaking or writing?
Writing.
Strategy or storytelling?
Ooh, strategy and storytelling, there's no difference for me.
Why is that?
Well, because without the story, you can't create the strategy, and without the strategy, you won't be able to define the story.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I would like to be an early bird, but unfortunately, I'm a night owl.
As we all would rather. Formal meeting or yarning circle?
Both. So for me, contextually, there are different places where, there's an appropriate time for a yarning circle, but then also there's an appropriate time for a meeting because there has to be accountability and transparency.
Yeah. Working from home or in-person connection?
In-person connection.
Community-led
Only
change.
because I like to get dressed up for work and I love people to see my fancy outfits.
And rather be in person talking to me.
Yeah.
Community-led change or policy-driven reform?
Policy-driven reform, because eventually policy is informed by cultural change.
Would you rather action or reflection?
Ooh. Action.
Songlines or Dreamtime stories?
I love Dreamtime stories.
Yep. And then would you rather city life or the country life?
Country bumpkin all the way through.
As we all.
Emphatic. What great questions.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, they were good ones.
So our podcast, Dixie, is for high school students, thinking about the pathway, just a little bit like Isaac here, and looking at how they can start to prepare themselves for life beyond school. And you gave us a little taste right at the beginning, but I'm interested in how your school experience has shaped your perspectives on leadership and advocacy, which forms the guts of your work. What was your school experience like? How did that set you up?
I did high school in Broken Hill, but I did primary school and a bit of high school in Bree. Primary school and my time in high school in Bree was fantastic because all of my peers were my cousins. So that was good, like there was a sense of community in school. The same community was the one that I had outside of school as well. So I love that. And a lot of our teachers were all our aunties and uncles, they were our AEAs, but they were also our school teachers as well. So I had a really strong sense of culture being embedded into everything that was there for me growing up. And then when I went to high school, I didn't have the greatest experience at high school, to be honest. I had really good support from teachers. There were a couple of really good teachers that I had there, but I had a lot of terrible experiences of racism when I was at school. People would, at the top of the stairs, spit on me, and people would. I was actually wasn't laughing about it because it's not great. It's obviously still traumatized me. But I saw this girl the other day, this woman who I went to school with, and she used to call me Sylvia the Silverback. She was so mean to me. Anyway, it's really interesting as those experiences of being bullied purely because of my race really informed my decision to go in and start advocating for mob, because if I'm experiencing that at school, I definitely know that people would be experiencing that when they're applying for a bank loan to buy a house, or they are going to the hospital and they need medical treatment, or they need to see a dentist, and a dentist is making assumptions about how they look after themselves, or their care. So a lot of those experiences really fired me up to build my skills around advocacy. And so that being understanding the thought that I have and then recognizing how to effectively communicate that, right? So at a very early age, probably around year 9, year 8, 9 and 10, I became very much aware of lived experiences and how we can actually reform a system to advocate and advance the needs of Aboriginal communities. And so about year 10, I started to actively get involved in the SRC. I don't know if that's what they call it anymore. So I was the
They do.
president of the SRC. And it was really because of one teacher that I had, Mr. Clark. He was the chemistry teacher, and he just said to me, "You have to be at the table if you want to be included in decision making." And he told me that in year 9, and then from that point on, I started to try to put myself in positions. So I was the SRC president, and then I went on to being the state representative for the Far West region in SRC. And I used to go to these meetings where we would meet with the Minister of Education. And I just really wanted to be at the table to have the conversation and to present a lived experience that may not be considered, because it really is often that there are people that even, not even just about black fellas, but even just, people making decisions about the lives of, in Sydney and what we should be doing around service delivery in, far western New South Wales, like making informed decisions about healthcare. Well, the little community that I come from, the GP comes out there 2 or 3 times, a week, or we get our fresh food once a week in Brie, So I really wanted to be, at an early age, I understood the importance purely because of what one teacher had said to me, planted in my head, is that if you want to be a part of decision making, you have to be sitting at the table. And so I really took advantage of creating those opportunities where I could put myself in those rooms to be a part of the discussion.
So Dixie, is that the motivation behind you creating your business, Nganya? Is that why you've started?
Well, to be honest, the motivation behind it was because I just was really cranky one day at work, and I was just like, I don't want to work for any of you idiots again. I'm leaving. So I actually started my business with $76. I had nothing, and I was so angry and so frustrated with the way work was just being done over and over again, and it wasn't getting any outcomes, and I just wanted to quit and leave. So I did that. And then I went and started my business, and I, at that point, could start to reframe my thinking and reframe the conversations that I was having with people that were, I guess different audiences at different times for different pieces of work, right? So I could start having those conversations. And I just, I did love my workplace. I mean, I was working at the kids' hospital at that point, and that wasn't the workplace that I had the issues with, but it was the system of New South Wales Health actually not advancing anything. So around the time that I was working in the government, we were very big on this policy called Closing the Gap. And Closing the Gap started with 7 targets around housing, education, criminal justice, child protection, employment, procurement, all these type of things. And we were just not improving anything. And I just got really frustrated with the system around government. So that's really why I quit. But what's kept me in the game, because actually running a business is really, really hard. If anyone tells you that you can just go and get an MBA or do a business diploma or a business degree at university to run a business, let me tell you now, that is a load of not accurate information, because no one knows how to run a business until they start running a business. Just let me share that with you. But what's kept me in the game is that I get to have different conversations with different people and just plant the seed for us to start doing things differently.
Yeah, wow. And then Dixie, you've talked about how we need other non-Indigenous people need to learn about our culture. Do you think First Nations culture from an early age needs to be in the school system or just in throughout community? And how can that impact our future generations?
Yeah, look, I think it is really important just from the perspective of your own conscious bias, right? So one of the things that's really important is that we have to be aware that your lived experience and your worldview is sitting right alongside someone else's lived experience and their worldview. And what this empathy and curiosity about the world around you presents is this willingness and this I guess, this opportunity to recognize everyone is different. Everyone's got different lived experiences and different, things that make them happy, things that make them sad, experiences that shape their identity. And so as you're, like 13, 14, and you're starting to get aware of the world, I think it's really important that you recognize that there are different cultures in the world that are so beautiful and so like, I'm really proud of my cultural identity. I love sharing, information and insights around our Dreamtime stories, about our bush medicines, about, the fish traps. I love being able to communicate that and share that with people. But I think the benefit of actually being aware that, you're not this little island on your own is that you start to realize that you can expand your horizons. And it's really important, right? It's highly likely that students who are listening to this now, you probably don't have, or maybe if you're in Sydney, but when you're in a small community, usually you surround yourself with people that think and sound like you, right? So like attracts like. But it's really important that you do expand your own interests, your own awareness, and your own insights that the world is much bigger than what you currently are. So that's the beauty of things like society and culture around languages, subjects in school. Like, you just start to realize that there is so much more out there. And that's not, no fault of your own, but it is really important that if you are consistently surrounding yourself with people that think and sound like you, you're going to form this concept, which is unconscious bias, and and then also there's a lot of, there's actually a downside to unconscious bias that will really limit your awareness and your insight, but also your career as well down the track. So there's a lot of value and there's a lot of beauty in being aware of the world around you.
Dixie, a lot of schools and organisations, and we heard Isaac describe before the work that his school's leading in the Reconciliation Action Plan in developing cultural awareness and reconciliation. Have you any advice for schools or organisations that are pursuing those objectives and how they can do that more effectively?
Consistency is the key here, right? The strategy that I want people to remember, the strategy you stick to is a strategy that works. Right? So consistency is the key here. And it's not just a matter of having someone come in and talk about local country or talking or, sharing with you how to do an acknowledgement of country or what are some of the, the boundaries of that local nation that you're on or what food sources were in the language that you speak. It's really about, I think there's two things you have to do. One, you have to recognize that there's culture, which is, our country, our spirituality, our language, our identity. All of those things make up who we are. And the other important point is to understand how the political experiences have shaped the outcomes of First Nations lived experiences in this country, right? So we are talking about things like the stolen generation, deaths in custody, being removed from country, introduction of particular food sources into our diet, and the impact that's had on our health and our well-being. So there's two things, right? Understand culture, but two, understand the political experiences, how political decisions have shaped lived experiences of Aboriginal people in our communities today. Because people tend to think that, colonisation occurred in 1788. Yes, sure, that's when the first fleet turned up here. However, there are a lot of things that consistently shape social disadvantage and the oppression of Aboriginal people in this country as a flow-on effect from 1788, and that's everything from the systems that are designed. There's a lot of racism that still informs decision making and systems in this country where blackfellas are consistently oppressed.
And
so consistency is the key, right? So just make sure you're doing those two things, because culture is not necessarily going to make you an effective, understanding culture will not make you an effective ally and advocate for addressing racism.
Yeah. For those schools or organisations that are working in that space, my experience has been that there's a lot of really good intentions and a lot of good conversations around the table in drafting those plans and working towards them. That consistency, as you said, tends to be a bit of an obstacle. I think the energy and commitment to those goals. What other barriers do you think get in the way of delivering those actions, those outcomes?
Look, I think there's a couple of things, right? The first thing that I do want to say to you is that any organisation can start a reconciliation action plan. Not
Yep.
every organisation will finish one.
Yep.
Right? So there are about 3,300 or 3,500 organisations that sit in the Reconciliation Australia RAP framework. And not all of them transition through the program because they've not necessarily built the RAP on a strong foundation, right? And then you've got people like me who can come along and ask you 2 or 3 questions and just huff and puff and blow your little house down, right? So you really need to understand who you are as an organisation, what you want to contribute to with reconciliation, and how it aligns with the core business of your organisation, because it needs to be implemented on a daily basis. So implementation is the key here. What I would say to you is manage the consistency, because you don't want to burn out. Everyone gets super excited when they launch the RAP. 6 months into it, no one cares, right? So you've got to maintain the consistency with it. There's also got to be a consistent learning strategy around the culture, but also the political experiences, because reconciliation action plans are not just about culture. They're also about dismantling systems that consistently oppress Aboriginal people. And we also need to be acting in a way that demonstrates we are anti-racism, and that true allyship is something that we're doing as an organisation or as a leadership team or even as a student body, right? So I think the consistency is the key, and you need to maintain that. Don't put the foot on the gas too far, right? Like, you need to go slow and you need to move at the pace of where your organisation is. A lot of RAP working groups tend to focus on what their own immediate needs are, and they consider how advanced they are in terms of their learning, their insight, their passion. You have to recognize that you are a tiny portion of the workforce or a tiny portion of the school body, and you've got to meet people where they're at. So if you need to go a little bit slower to build capacity and awareness, that's what you have to do if you want to make the document and the strategy impactful. But there's also got to be a fine line that you have to balance. Don't put unnecessary pressure on the organisation to be far more advanced, because if you move quicker than what you have the capacity to do, things are going to fall apart. But you then also have to make sure you're stretching your organisation so we are actually reaching our full potential as a reconciliation partner and ally for First Nations communities.
That's terrific advice. Thanks, Dixie.
Dixie, as well, for First Nations students who want to make a difference and become a leader within their school or just their community, what advice would you give to them to pursuing that?
Have a crack. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I mean, I make mistakes every single day, and I am as impactful in my work because of my mistakes. I love making mistakes because it makes me better every single day. Also, look for people, look for role models that will challenge you and that will stretch you and that will help you, think about where is your full potential actually at. And I also want you to remember, just because you don't know someone who hasn't you haven't done something before doesn't mean that you can't do it, right? So check on that internal talk that you have. Are you being critical of yourself, or are you hyping yourself up? Because I'm telling you now, no one hypes me up better than me.
So
It's
self-motivation.
really, really important that you check on that internal self-talk. Are you being critical, and are you holding yourself back? The other thing that I just want to say to you, which is really, really important, when you are thinking that you can't do something, is there actual evidence to say that you can't do something, or is it just your self-limiting belief that you can't do it because you haven't done it before? It's really, really important that you focus on the facts and not your feelings, right? Facts are really important in this case, rather than your feeling, when you are consistently wanting to put yourself in spaces where you haven't been before. There are so many rooms that I've been in where I've been the first black fella or the only black fella, but we're there. And so this is where we have to keep going. We have to keep pushing.
Yeah, wow. And Dixie, also for young people who want to make a difference in their communities or school, or just as a person, where would you start?
I would make sure you're consistently connected to community and you're taking advice and your leadership from community. You will learn so much from our old people, and the best mentors and the best business life coaches I've ever had have been elders in community, because I've watched and I've learned, and then I've taken what I've seen from them do and apply it to my own development as a woman, also as a business leader, and as someone who works in reconciliation. So I really think that you need to build your relationships. There's a good old saying that your net worth is your network. As you're starting out, make sure you build relationships and you maintain those relationships with people, because there are people now that, come to me or I go to them, and, they've been a part of my life for 20, 30 years, and they're really important. So relationships are critical there. I think also one of the strategies that's always worked for me is at the beginning of every year, I set some goals for myself, and they're not necessarily business goals. They are goals around, what do I want to achieve with my health? Is it 8 hours of sleep a night? Is it exercising twice a day? Is it going on a holiday? Is it reducing my work hours? Whatever it might be, I have to have a plan, but then I also have to have a strategy to achieve those goals, right? So don't set goals for yourself without knowing how you're going to get there. So the action plan and the steps that you take every single day is what's going to help you move the needle towards your goals. So set those goals, maintain the relationships, but also be very ambitious. I want you to really focus on the biggest potential that you have. And I really want you to aim for that, because, I love this saying. My nan also told me this is, aim for the moon and you'll land on the stars. Even if you miss the moon, you'll land on the stars. And I've always loved that. So even if you aim for your highest potential, you're still going to get within that 10% of it for me. That's what I've always thought about.
Yeah, well, so what would be the best piece of advice you've ever seen? Would that be what your nana said to you?
Best piece of advice. Oh gosh, should have thought about this. You know what? It's probably the one thing that's coming to me is the Nike slogan, just do it. Even if it feels uncomfortable or you've never done something before, just do it anyway. I always think about how it is that I push myself forward, and if it's skill that I haven't got, or it's, a new relationship I'm building, whatever it might be, or training for a marathon, just do it anyway. Just get in and do the work. So that's probably other point there is just do the work. Don't expect to be somewhere without doing the work, because you are in control of your own destiny when it comes to your career and your education. Do the work.
So would you say consistency is the key to any stepping stone for someone's future?
Consistency is not the key. Consistency is the game. If you're not consistent at anything, you're never going to move the needle towards where you want to be.
Yeah, well. And what's the best piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners today, or even myself?
Finish what you started. Definitely. So if you, set a goal for yourself, or you said that your word is your everything, right? And your word not to other people, but your word to yourself, right? So you really need to, my advice to you is maintain your personal integrity and accountability, because when it all falls down around you, integrity and accountability and your transparency to yourself is one of the most valuable assets that you can have. Don't assume that everyone holds those values around accountability and integrity, because it's not. As life goes on, you start to realize a lot of people are not who they said they were, right? People can say one thing and they can do another thing, right? So my advice to you is identify what your personal values are and maintain accountability for each of them.
What about, just to jump in quickly, Isaac, what about for a young footy player sitting next to me here, Dixie? I hear you're a bit of an ambassador for the Koori knockout. You're a bit of a leggy. Isaac, I hear, is a very talented young footy player. Any advice for him?
Have a backup plan.
Yeah, I've got that. Don't worry, just in case that doesn't work out.
Yes, have a backup plan. But yeah, I love football. Everyone listening, please support the Burke Warriors. That's my favourite team. Team my brothers play for. Definitely have a backup plan, but also make sure you set goals for yourself on and off the field, and again have that action plan. Honestly, the consistency is the key to everything in terms of bettering yourself with everything that you do. So, but yeah, support Burke Warriors, and good luck with your footy, Isaac.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So Dixie, what is the most important mindset or skill you have to be who wants to be a change maker?
Probably comes back to mistakes, to be honest. is that I think I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, but I've also reflected on a lot of those mistakes and recognized where it is that I can be better and where it is that I need to be different. So, what it is that I've done well, what it is that I haven't done well, what do I need to stop, and what it is that I need to start moving forward. So I think to be a change agent, you have to be prepared to make mistakes, but it's not the mistake that you make that matters, it's how you bounce back from the mistake that defines who you are and how much impact you're going to make in the world.
That's a great way for us to finish up, Dixie. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. You have given us some absolute gems. And we're so grateful for you sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. We've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time, and go the Burke Warriors.
So make sure to visit Sydney Catholic School's social media channels to stay up to date with our episode releases. And discover how Sydney Catholic Schools acknowledges and celebrates Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's cultures and relationships to country. Visit our website at www.sydcatholicschools.nsw.edu.au.